All right, so hopefully most of you know about Chewy, but if not, our mission is to be the most trusted and convenient online destination for pet parents and partners everywhere. You probably are familiar with our blue boxes that you see quite often, or you are a pet parent and a customer, and if so, I thank you for it. You might not know about all our different offerings, so just before we get into it, use this time to give a little background on us. We are an online e-commerce solution for pet parents. It's not just dog and cats. We do have selections for other pets like birds and lizards and things like that. We have services are really, we realize you can shop at many different places. So services is an area that we put a lot of effort into, and it's why we are the leader. We have gotten into our pet health experiences. So we have a Connect with a Vet service. We have pharmacy, compounding. We just recently launched an adoption finder, and we also offer veterinarian-based information through petmd.com. Next slide, please. And then just quickly about me. First, I'm a pet parent myself. If you ever have pets or you ever have children and they're trying to push you and convince you to get a pet, taking a job at Chewy seems to give them the impetus that they think there's some divine intervention happening. But that is my puppy, Abby, who will be joining us on our journey today. I'm a director of engineering here at Chewy. And my organization represents the content platform, which is our content management system, our digital asset manager. I also handle, once we serve up that content, the search engine optimization and search engine marketing. So basically, any content interaction with the search engine is where we look to optimize. And then my org runs two content sites that Chewy runs. One is Be Chewy, which is a digital lifestyle magazine for pet parents. And the other one is PetMD, which we just talked about. Prior to Chewy, I worked for Amazon Alexa, which I ran the data lake associated with the Alexa utterances and the processing of them. I worked at EasyCater, which is an online food, basically a business, online e-commerce site for business business users. It's kind of like a commercial version of DoorDash or Grubhub. And then I was an ad tech at JumpTap Millennial Media earlier in my career. Next slide, please. I need to put this plug in. We are hiring my team also across the spectrum. So we have 1,450 openings today. Specifically, we're looking for engineers, managers, data scientists, and product managers. Our 4 key locations for the technical side of our world is Dania Beach, Florida, Boston, Minneapolis, and Seattle. Our career site is available for you if you're interested in learning more, or just reach out to me. Next slide. So getting all that context out of the way, let's talk about the challenge that we faced when I joined Chewy. I had 4 teams rolled up into me. I had 1 quality engineer. She basically time sliced her time across those 4 teams, manually testing functionality across 3 different sites. And as the functionality completed, she basically would go in, validate it, and then move on to the next beast. She did an amazing job doing this, but in talking to her, she was like, this is really a challenging position. We're mobile first. We support 5 different browsers on both desktop and mobile, and PC versus desktop. So you can see the permutation starts getting quite high, and having 1 quality engineer to 3 different sites became very challenging. The cadence for Chewy.com at the time was weekly, and PetMD and Be Chewy was daily. So this created quite a challenge. It looked like to me that we were not going to be able to expand out our testing without significantly hiring more quality engineers. And we basically were doing all manual testing in my domain. And so this seemed to be a problem. My dog, Abby here, she's kind of looking at this a little funny as we were hiking, and she was about to cross some water. She's like, "Are you sure you want me to do this?" So, it was definitely a challenge that we could have done a better way. Next slide. So, that was a challenge that we faced, but we also, unfortunately, we were not moving in a static, we weren't staying static. We were moving forward. So Like most startups that have become successful, we started off with a monolith. We were moving to single page applications across the Chewy.com ecosystem. And so the code that we would have to test, specifically on the SEO side, would multiply, as we operate in a somewhat in a way team fashion across different code bases across the Chewy.com website. As for example, the product listing page and the product detail page are going to be two separate code bases, and some of that functionality is core, some of it is unique to each of those pages. So this is Abby with her friend, just trying to show that there are multiple dogs, and we have increased challenges when you have multiple code bases. That weekly release was almost all manual. There was some automation that was going on there, and there was a lot of sign off required to get that weekly release off. Next slide, please. And so this is one of the wiki pages that we create weekly, or did create weekly, showing all the people in all the domains, in all the areas, in all the browsers that need to be signed off for us to release to Chewy.com. As you can see, my dog here, Abby, she is just exhausted just thinking about trying to wrangle all those people. And we rotate who the release manager is. And the release manager there isn't really focused on quality. They're focused on wrangling 25 different people to sign off. This was a nightmare. And I looked at this, the team looked at this, and we're like, we need to do better. This is just not something that is scalable for us. And as we continue to write functionality, we were going to be testing a narrower and narrower percentage of our code base. So you can see why Abby's exhausted. I'm exhausted just looking at the sheet. It's been a while since I've actually been a part of this release cycle. This was not something that we could sustain. So we need to do something better. I challenged my team to do so. Next slide. So the first thing we did was what were the tools we were using internally? We were doing manual testing for the most part in our team, but we heard anecdotal stories of what was going on elsewhere within the company. So we want to see what toys we had. Here's Abby playing with a bunch of toys that she has. Notice we've got a couple balls here. I'll come back to that in a little bit. But we found 5 different tools that were being used and poked around. One was Browser Stack. Test Project seemed to be the one that had the most usage within it. Some people were testing APIs with Rest Assured, and there were some people who were dabbling with Cypress and Test Cafe. In talking to those different teams, what we found was they love the open source aspect of it, who can complain about free and having a community working against it. But then we were starting to have issues. We were trying to do mobile web testing, for example. And all we wanted to do was be able to integrate it into our build and be able to adjust the viewport so that we could test different browsers and test them at different size and see how responsive worked. We had trouble with that. We also had trouble trying to do all that plus use VPN access. Most of what we were getting back from Test Project was go and use emulators or layer Browser Stack on top of it. And so we tried this, we were having trouble. We, tried to reach out to both of those products. They were pointing at each other. They were pointing us to forums. It was email support. It was just really, really a struggle for us. And in the end, we gave up. We basically couldn't find a solution that worked for us. We also found that the mobile web browsers that were supported was lacking across many of the products. We also found analytics was lacking, that we just didn't have an ability to see how well the tests will work, the repeat of the runs over time, and then integrate it into the tools that we were working on. So we really struggled with it. Like, hey, there's got to be a solution here. This does not seem like we are inventing a new problem. Next slide. So we decided to run a bake-off. I had used Ghost Inspector in a previous life and had really positive experience with it. We had heard about mabl. Actually, I knew about mabl because when I was at EasyCater, we moved out of office space and mabl moved in. And so that got mabl on my roadmap, just one of those random things. We looked at mabl's webpage. We saw that Lola was a customer, which just recently got bought up by Capital One. And I had some contacts over there. And so we reached out to hear about their experience with mabl. And had heard a lot of positive things and areas that we would need to work on as well. And so we decided to run a bake-off. So here's Abby. She's all ready to get going and digging in. And so we tested all 4 of these products. We created a matrix with dimensions on our criteria, things like mobile web support, the ability to hit our lower environments through VPN, what analytics support, integrations to our existing toolings of Confluence, Jenkins, and Slack, the level of support we can get, and a couple other criteria, but in general, these were the main criteria. We ran it, and mabl came ahead as the clear winner. Next slide. So once we chose mabl, we now needed to do, and we procured it, we now decided what we needed to do. Like, how are we going to roll this out? How are we going to be successful? This is Abby, the first time she saw snow. She was a little apprehensive, but she really thought it basically was ice cream falling from the sky, and it has since loved snow to this day. The approach we took was to roll it out to a single team, identify the base functionality that we wanted to test. The SEO team was a perfect one, as we had test cases already written associated with that weekly build. And we basically built a base test suite in both desktop and mobile. Ran it for a while just to make sure that we were happy with how it was running. And then we attempted to change the culture of the team to, instead of relying on the quality engineer, instead trying to get the team to write tests and own that instead of throwing it over the fence. Trying to be more agile versus waterfall, right? And so get them on board, get them bought into it. And once we felt successful with one team, we moved on to the second and the third. And we're towards the end of the third one, and we'll move on to the fourth team relatively soon. So this has been successful to us. And we shared our learnings throughout the organization and with leadership, and they have, and we also have a automated test kill that we shared some of our learnings there as well. All right, next slide. So some of the results that we found some bugs that we had not known about, which is always good, specifically when you're dealing with SEO functionality. Bugs can really have a detrimental effect on the amount of traffic that's sent to our way. This is Abby. She found a tennis ball there, so she's pretty excited. Next slide. This is Abby. She's pretty happy because we became much more efficient and we're covering more functionality. So the amount of testing it required to do that weekly storefront release was about 2 to 3 engineering days. We got it down to about an hour per week to run that base core functionality. So basically we've recouped about half a week of engineering time to work on other things, just testing core functionality. So we've applied that to writing more functionality. So we're covering more functionality on a weekly basis. And now at this point, the quality engineer is actually working on other things in other programs that she was unable to do so because we just did not have that effect. The 1 hour is because we're, as of last week, we were kicking this test off manually and running it. We've actually since integrated with Jenkins, and now it's running automatically each week. So that's even better. So awesome stuff there. That's why I'm happy, Abby's happy, all good on that regard. Next slide. We changed the culture. This is Abby on her first vacation. It took a little while to understand that we were away from home, but she loved being by the beach. She did not like the signs though that said, stay off the beach near the water. But we did change the culture on the teams, at least on mine. They have become self-sufficient, that they don't need a day-to-day quality engineer. They are writing tests. They understand the value of it, and they're thinking more end-to-end in terms of their responsibility as engineers, and not, hey, I take it until it's code complete and then I hand it off to somebody else. But they are owning up to being an engineer end-to-end, which I think is a positive across the board. And some of them have really taken to the tool and really looking for ways to integrate it in other ways and talking to other teams about the value of it. So all positive in that regard. Next slide. So let's talk about the lessons learned here. Like, I've talked about a lot of positive things, but there are some things that we've taken away where we've hit road bumps, and required some thought on our part on how to do things differently. So here's Abby. This is the first day of school. My son is across the street there. She did not take well to not having people in the house every day, all day long, that she did over the last year. So she's adapted. We've had to adapt. So one of the things we've learned is interest is high, adoption is slower. So like I talked about, we went to the Automated Testing Guild. We demonstrated what we've been doing and said, hey, this is great. You should all try it. And they're like, that's cool. That's great. Yeah, I would like a demo, and mabl has been great about doing individualized demos through our customer success representative. But teams are set in their ways. And so we've really struggled with expanding this much more outside of my teams. There are a couple of teams that are starting to pick it up, but in general, it's been really hard. The other thing about it is, there's a short term versus long term. Like I got to get my release out. I don't have time for this. I don't want to fight to add it to the agenda. So that's been a struggle. Like we took a long-term view on it, and one of our operating principles internally is to think big, and that is what we've done. But in some teams, it's a little bit harder. They have different deadlines and pressures, and so that has been a struggle. Changing culture is hard. Even just starting off with the quality engineer on my team, I think she looked at it as like, well, if we're going to automation, like what does this mean for my role? What are my new responsibilities? This is not necessarily what I signed up for. And so there's an emotional impact of changing culture, right? Some of the engineers were a little bit resistant to getting up and running on this. As like testing, I've never had a test before, right? And so thinking about how you roll things out emotionally is a really big challenge. People's roles do change, and changing how things worked and the way things have always operated takes some effort. And I would encourage you, and we constantly battle it, to think about how to do that. Next slide. So one of the resistance we've received from some teams is that they really like open source and they really like writing code. So going back to the page, the picture before, where my dog had 4 or 5 different balls that we have bought from Chewy for her, she still loves tennis balls. They're free. They're always at the park, and she just loves them. And so some teams, that we have worked with really love open source and love writing code instead of the recording aspect of it. And we have been unable to change that. And so we have multiple solutions that are running around within Chewy. I'm not trying to impose our solution on it, but I think there are some benefits that we have uncovered that some of the other tools that they're using lack in. And, it's an area that we constantly have conversations about. Next slide. As I've mentioned, changing culture is hard. This is Abby, she's hiding under the blanket. I've brought in a couple of different tools that across the spectrum, that I brought in that I've had success with in the past. And some have really taken off like wildfire, and some have been a lot harder to get a stranglehold. mabl has been one of those for it. My teams have really been enthusiastic about it and really have taken to it, and I really appreciate their open mind on it. But like I said, some of the other teams that we've faced have really struggled with, changing tools. They've kind of bounced around on it. They really haven't put priority into thinking about it. There's still many of those teams on that sign-up sheet that are either doing manual testing or some combination where they keep bouncing around on different tools. We've demoed this to probably 5 different orgs, and 1 or 2 of them have really picked up on it. We've given demos to leadership, and leadership has been excited about it, but they also want us to continue moving software, and in some cases they've really pushed to move towards automated testing, but when other priorities have come up, sometimes it has taken a back burner. So It's not an easy problem. I think that's probably the biggest area when you're trying to change your software development lifecycle and the tools that you use and people's roles. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough, but that's probably the biggest challenge that we face across the board in trying to change how we release. So I wish you all luck. I'm happy to answer some questions about our usage of mabl, our journey and how we've done it. Any questions about Chewy or my dog Abby? But I do appreciate you listening in, and I'm happy to help in any way possible.
Thank you so much, Russell. That was great. We do have a couple of questions from the audience so far. So just to dive in, could you expand on your strategy for how you work to change the mentality of your team to incorporate testing a little bit more? Like if you could talk to how you sold the evolution of that idea and how you got buy-in from engineers, that would be great.
Sure. So for us, I think me being enthusiastic about it in my org probably helped. I got buy-in from my leaders and they understood the benefit of it. And so having leadership on board really helped. There were a couple of evangelists that a couple of engineers who basically became evangelists. And so we gave them demos, we gave them access. We had them partner with the QE, and together they really, started demonstrating the value and really jumping in and writing tests and showed the team and just showed leadership on the technical side. I think in general, if you start small and grow from there and really work to get a couple of your senior or influential engineers on board, that really helps as they lead by example.
Great, thank you. For our next question, could you describe what is your quality engineer's responsibility day to day since you've kind of started to implement mabl?
Sure. So she's still working on the 4th team to write the base set of tests, but she's gone from basically writing tests on an ad hoc basis, time slicing from teams, to now writing this test suite. She's going to morph into a role where, I've been calling her a digital librarian, where she will own the platform, ensure the tests are well organized, that there's a set of components that are shared. Like, we should not be rewriting or re-recording how to log into our website, for example, right? And she should be responsible for test data. She will be, over time, responsible for increasing coverage of our test coverage and the analytics and as such. Basically, I view her over time as a digital librarian and a product manager of our automated test suite.
Great, thank you. The next question I have for you here is, how would you determine whether something in your application would need to be tested automatically, or are you still incorporating manual testing into your strategy? Are there cases for both of those?
So I do get pushback quite a bit from either the engineers or some of the managers who report up to me that they think there is value. Oh, actually, I missed that. There is value in quality engineers. I somehow missed that slide. I apologize. So they do provide quite a bit of value, and they look at things a little bit differently than engineers do. And so there are instances where I think they do bring a lot of value to write unique or manual tests, but it's more in actually creating the test case. It's not actually in running the test itself. It's just, they have a different way, they have a different spidey sense of kind of looking at a problem and being like, we should look at this edge case and we should look at this edge case. In general, I try to push back as hard as possible that there should be a way to automate always. Now, there are certain edge cases that there is difficulty in actually crafting an automation for it, or there's a limitation in the tool or something where there's some effort. Now, there have been cases where we have struggled to actually automate a test. We've gone back to mabl. They've taken the feedback and incorporated it back into the product, or given us strategies on how to automate it. But in general, I try to push my team to always automate it, because even if you do it manually, you're going to do it once or only a few times and not come back to it. And you're basically adding your own sort of testing debt.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you. You mentioned kind of your base test suite earlier in the presentation. How did you prioritize what was in that kind of initial suite of tests that you automated?
Sure. So we basically had a set of manual tests anyway, but we worked with the product managers and the quality engineers, or quality engineer, and we basically looked at like, what is our core set of functionality and what would be a set of sanity tests across a set of browsers, both mobile and desktop. Basically it's if we were to run a test right before we released to production, what would it be, even if it was manual or automated?
Well, you mentioned also a test guild earlier. What topics do you typically talk about? And are you meeting frequently? What does that kind of like meeting cadence look like and the agenda look like?
Sure. So we meet monthly. The agenda is supplied by members of the guild. It goes across all of our engineering orgs. It's a voluntary organization of either software leaders or quality engineers we have basically the last couple of months have been about tools and strategies that different teams have been using. So we did a demo of what we have been up to recently. The topic for yesterday was actually integration into our build and some of the different tooling that people have done with releasing with the automation into Jenkins. A couple of months ago, we looked at Rest Assured and how people were doing API testing, for example.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, collaboration is a huge topic as well. So it's always great to hear those sort of things. Probably have time for just one or two more questions. So if anything else pops in or pops into your mind, definitely ask that now. But Russell, what was some of the criteria you used in your like tool bake-off evaluation?
Sure. So we wanted to be able to test across all of our environments and browsers. So browser support, we did not want to use an emulator because we thought the weight of that and the issues associated with integrating that into our build were just a non-starter. So we needed to be able to test on all of our browsers, both desktop and mobile. We need to be able to test our lower environments, so VPN access or some sort of whitelisting needed to occur. Some analytics support was important to us. I wanted the ability to basically be able to record tests. If we could write it in code as well, that would be a bonus. Some componentization of it was important to us. So like I said, I don't want to be basically rewriting or re-recording the ability to navigate parts of our site, right? You should be able to have a component library. Support that wasn't a forum or some sort of async based support was also a criteria for me.